Hi there, this is Andrea Mowry of Drea Renee Knits, and this is I'll Knit If I Want To, a weekly podcast where I try my best to answer some of your questions. It is actually Friday morning, and typically this video is already live and out there, but I have had a cough that just won't quit. And as you can probably start to see with like my changing background here, we are so in the thick of moving that yesterday I just could not film. Any talking I did immediately threw me into a little coughing fit. So it is just lingering. It's just lingering. What is up with that? What is up with colds that last for what feels like weeks? Anyways, I'm gonna do my best to do this today with minimal coughing. We'll see how long I last. I'm hoping to do all 5 questions. If I start coughing a whole bunch, I don't wanna make any of y'all listen to that, and I don't wanna lose my voice. So we'll see how far we get. I am wearing my Inclinations cowl. This is a half Fisherman's Rib cowl that is knit up in the same style as like my shift cowl. I love this one. It is, I believe, Dear Diary. Nope. Valley Girl and Light Years. I'm pretty sure are the 2 colors I used for this, but half Fisherman's Rib's a really cool stitch. It is really similar fabric to like a half brioche stitch. And it's just really fun to knit. I went through a phase. I did a couple sweaters, a shawl, this guy. It's just a fun stitch to play with. So as always, I will put that information down in the show notes, and let's go ahead and answer some questions while I still have a voice. I'm gonna start with a sip of water, so I can last a little longer. Okay. Oh, I also have to show my really sweet little sticker, my framed sweater. This is a watercolor painting done by Nora for Spin Cycle Yarns. Isn't that amazing? We handed these out on the hill at Rhinebeck, so if you were there, hopefully you got one. And then this really fun sticker that you would have seen in my newsletter. Candace came up with this idea to show our collaboration. So Spin Cycle Yarns spins the fiber into yarn, Farmer's Daughter Fibers dyes it, and then I came up with the design. So sweet. I finally have some stickers on this water bottle. I hadn't had any for a while. Okay. Question number 1. Curious about how you handle your spins on your drop spindle or supported spindle. I love to drop spindle, but I'm trying to figure out, once I get my singles made, do I just add them to a bobbin? How do I transfer them from the spindle? I have a wheel, but I really like to ply on a spindle. I've tried the Andean bracelet for 2-ply, but I really want to do a 3-ply. So how would one do this for singles made on a drop spindle? So you have a couple options. Personally, I spindle spin more on supporteds than on drops. But for supported spindles, I always transfer those onto weaving bobbins, and I use a weaving bobbin winder. I have a Lazy Kate for spindles that I just put my spindle on there, take the single over to the bobbin winder and wind it up. But I've also done it from my drop spindle where I just hold the spindle so that the shaft is pointing right at the bobbin winder, and I just wind right off of the spindle. So you could put it onto an empty bobbin or a weaving bobbin. The other option, and what I see people doing the most often, is doing a plying ball. So what you would do for a plying ball is you would spin your singles onto your drop spindle. Once your drop spindle's full, wind those off just by hand into a ball. Once you have 3 balls, take your 3 singles, hold them together, and create a giant ball with all 3 held together. And this is your plying ball. And then you can ply straight from there. You can put it into like a box or whatever. You just need to keep it from bouncing all around. You could even put it into a project bag that cinches closed so that you can just have the plies coming out the top. You might need to weight it down so it's not bopping around. And you can just ply straight from that plying ball. And I think that method works really well. There are definitely other things you can do. You can use a shoebox to make a Lazy Kate for your spindles. There's all kinds of ideas out there. So I recommend doing a little search. I think even here on YouTube, you will probably find so many videos of amazing drop spindle spinners and how they go about spinning. From there, I took a drop spindle class on School of Sweet Georgia when I first started spindle spinning. And there was a number of different ways to do it on there, but it does seem like the main way I see is the plying ball. And that's the way I have personally done it myself. So that's what I would recommend, but there's lots of different ways out there. So try different ones out and kind of see which one brings you the most joy. And I have a feeling I'll get asked. My spindle Kate that I use as my lazy Kate, that's from Dan Tracy Designs. He also makes spindles, and he does this great lap. Oh, what does he call it? Oh, it has a clever name and I'm gonna forget it, but it's this piece of wood that sits on your lap, and in the middle is a little dish so you can support spindle spin. He canoes a lot. It's how he came up with this idea. But anyways, that's really fun to check out too. But Dan Tracy Designs is where I got my spindle Kate from, and I do think it makes things a little bit easier because it holds it for you while you can then ply or wrap a ball or put it onto a bobbin, what have you. Okay, question number 2. I'm planning to knit the framed sweater using Gilliatt yarn. I have a question about the quantity I'll need. Although both Gilliatt and Spinner's Daughter worsted are classified as worsted weight, they have different yardages per 100 grams. So I'm wondering which measurement is more relevant, weight in grams or yardage. I assume it's yardage, but there's about a 70-meter difference between the two. 100% yardage. So you still need to get the same length of yarn and instead of the same weight. The reason there is a weight difference there, I actually went and looked up Gilliatt. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, because I had a feeling. And that yarn is a semi-woolen yarn. What it sounded like when I read the description is that I think that they do a woolen spin on the singles, but then they put a worsted spin in the ply to create really nice stitch definition, but it still is a loftier, airier yarn. So worsted spun yarn is smoothed out and compacted down as it's spun. So there is actually more fiber per inch of a worsted spun yarn than a woolen spun yarn, which is going to have a lot of air left in it. That is going to make up some of its girth, if you will. So that is why they are going to weigh a different amount, because worsted spun yarn is going to have more fiber per inch than your woolen spun yarn, which is going to be a lot loftier and airier. And that's what helps create some of that thickness and bounce, is because the fibers are all disarrayed so they can puff up more and create that same thickness. Whereas I think of a worsted spun yarn like it's all smoothed and kind of condensed down, and it's jam-packed with fiber. So they're going to weigh differently. A worsted spun yarn is always going to be heavier than a woolen spun yarn, even though they might be the same thickness and the same length. So that's why there's that discrepancy. So yeah, just make sure that you go by yards. You know, let's say you need 1,200 yards of your main color, go by that, not the 500 grams that's listed in the pattern or whatever it is. So there you go. All right, question number 3 is about sweater fit and modification. I've really struggled with finding sweaters that suit my body type. Drop shoulder and or crew neck sweaters do not do my curvy body any justice. I find that the crew neck sweaters ride up on my neck and it feels like they're choking me. I love the design elements from many of the modern sweaters, but most of them are either a crew neck or a drop shoulder. Do you have any suggestions on how I might be able to go about changing the neckline on a sweater to a wider scoop neck, or even changing a crew neck to a V-neck, or how to change a drop shoulder to a set-in sleeve? I'm a confident pattern changer most of the time, but this one has me stumped. So let's talk about drop shoulders first. I don't think I would feel super confident in attempting to articulate how to modify any drop shoulder into a set-in sleeve. For me, I think I would need to look at a pattern. I would want to see how much ease is that sweater meant to have, because that is going to really affect trying to put a set-in sleeve onto that sweater. If it is an oversized sweater and you try to just put a set in sleeve. Like you'd really have to carve it into where your actual shoulder is, because you want a set in sleeve to follow the form of your shoulder. You don't want it to accidentally be sitting down here, and a drop shoulder is just how it sounds. It is knit. It's a big tube, and it is knit so that part of that tube drops off of your shoulder and actually creates the first length of your sleeve. So one thing I would just be curious about that you could look at if you're like, oh, but there are some drop shoulders out there that I just really love and I really want to knit them. So maybe I'll put up with the fact that they're a drop shoulder because I love them a lot, is pay attention to the ease. See how much ease that pattern calls for and play around. It might be about finding the ease that you like in that style of sweater. So maybe if you are curvier, you tend to feel like you don't want to do oversized clothing. You don't like a lot of positive ease. I have some friends who are bigger busted, and so sometimes they're a little wary of something with a lot of positive ease because they don't love how it hangs off of their bust. So I would challenge you to try to see if there is an amount of ease in a drop shoulder sweater that you do like the way that that fits your body shape, whether it be less or more, and kind of being open to either, and also thinking about drape in those sweaters. I think that it's pretty important for a drop shoulder sweater to have some decent drape so that it can flow nicely off the body. Yeah, sorry, my mind just started going into all the other elements too about like length. I think that can play such an important role of letting it hit at different areas of your body, depending on how much ease it has, because it's all about kind of creating that balance. So sometimes if something's really oversized and long, like I can't do that. I'm too short-waisted. And so if I try to do a really long garment that is also drop shoulder with a bunch of positive ease, I just look like I'm wearing clothing that doesn't fit me. Like that style does not work for me. So I've had to play around and see where, I've talked about this before with like magic numbers. For me, I find that 10 inches of positive ease in a drop shoulder sweater tends to work really, really well for me. So that is kind of a place that my mind automatically goes to if I'm going to knit that style of sweater. So long story long, I recommend even going to a store and trying on some like pre-made drop shoulders and just try one that is really oversized, try one that's cropped, try one that is, only 3 inches of positive ease. Like maybe play around, and that might be the answer there, is finding the ease that you like in that style. And you might just not like the style, and that's totally fine too. Like I know people who hate raglans. They won't knit a raglan, or we all have our things that we feel like just we don't feel good when we wear that style, and that's totally fine. But I do think it might be a little tricky to turn them into a set in sleeve depending on how much ease is happening in that sweater. But let's talk about the easier modification, which would be the neckline. So you could definitely modify a neckline. I would start with a pattern that doesn't have a lot going on patterning wise. So I would start with a sweater that is maybe more stockinette or a single color, something that you're not going to have to fiddle too much just while you figure out some of that math. I would keep it to an easy one to begin with. Really, a scoop neck is just a deeper crew neck. So if you want to have your crew neck be a little lower, if you're knitting from the top down, you would just want to continue further before you start that front neck shaping. If you're going from the bottom up, begin the neck shaping earlier, and you're just going to work straight for a little bit longer. And that will just bring it down, and you'll just have to pick up more stitches to make up for, you're creating a bigger neck opening, but that would be pretty easy peasy. You wouldn't have to change anything else. Because the shape of the crew neck is the same as a scoop neck, it's just dropped down further. For a V-neck, you can absolutely internet search this and actually find instructions for people who have done blog posts on how to change a neck into a V-neck. But basically all you're gonna do is you're gonna pick your point where you want your V-neck to start, remember that you're probably going to do some kind of neck treatment on there. The simplest is a rolled neck, and that can actually look really, really great with a V-neck, where you're just going to pick up stitches and knit for like 3 rows and bind off and let it curl. That can look surprisingly polished and nice. But if you want to do ribbing or anything like that, you're going to have to deal with some decreases here in the center of the V-neck while you're working your ribbing. So just, you'll want to know that part of it. But you're going to pick a point, consider how much, if you wanted to do ribbing, how much that's going to add to it. So if you pick a point, you're like, oh, I want it to be 8 inches deep, but then you're going to pick up and do an inch of ribbing. Well, now it's 7 inches deep. So just kind of like think about that a little bit ahead of the game. But you're going to pick that point. And again, it depends if you're working top down or bottom up. But if it was bottom up, you're just going to start decreasing at an even rate till you get your neck as open as you would like it. And it's going to depend on how steep you want that V-neck or how open you want that V-neck, what that rate of shaping is going to be, how quickly you want to decrease those stitches out, or if you're working from the top down, how quickly you want to bring those stitches in. But I feel like I have definitely seen blog posts out there. There's also books out there. I love, I've said them before, but Barbara Walker, Knitting from the Top, Elizabeth Zimmerman. There's all kinds of design books out there. I just got a new one, but I've already packed it. It's also out of print, so it's like $75 to get it from anywhere. So that one might not be the best option. I would go Barbara Walker, Knitting from the Top, if it were me. And you can always reverse engineer and go the other way. But that is what I would do. I definitely think you can modify those, especially if you're already pretty comfortable with pattern modification. I think that's a great place to start. And I think you might even find that when a drop shoulder has a neckline you feel better in, maybe then you'll like the drop shoulders better too. But there's so many sweaters out there. So if drop shoulders aren't for you, that's also totally okay. All right, so this is a very specific pattern question, but I'm gonna answer it. This is for the Strya cardigan. I'm knitting your Strya cardigan for my daughter, and I have a question regarding the sleeve decreases. The pattern starts to always work the decrease round in place of a round 2, which begins with a knit 1 back through the back purl 1. So I'm gonna stop you there because that's not what it says. In the pattern, it says, always work the decrease round in place of a round 2. It does not say the part which begins with, because it is going to change what it begins with. So if you look at the pattern, there's an even row or round that is worked that I think you purl it. I can't remember if you knit it or you purl it. One round, you alternate stitches, doing either knit 1 through, knit 1 below, purl 1, knit 1 below, purl 1, or it can be purl 1, knit 1 below, purl 1, knit 1 below, but you are always alternating those 2 stitches. The other round, you just work even. I can't remember if it's a knit round or a purl round. So all it's saying is work in place of round 2. It doesn't actually say that it begins with a knit 1 below. It can start with the purl 1 below, because as you are decreasing stitches out in your sleeve, it is going to change what that row starts with. So that's going to answer the rest of your question, which was basically in the next box, it says, if the round begins with a knit 1 below, do this decrease round. If the round begins with a purl 1, use this decrease round. So that's why I think you just auto-corrected in your head that it had to be that's exactly as round 2 was written, knit 1 below, purl 1, but it's just saying on the row where you're alternating those stitches, don't do it on your even row. So there you go. Hopefully that clears that one up for you. And as always, if you do have a specific pattern question, on the last page of all of my patterns, you will find our pattern email help. So you can always email that too, so that you can get a swifter response, just so that everyone knows. That's a great way to get help on a very specific question to any of my patterns. All right, last question is, I've noticed you read a lot. I'm curious if this is something you do while you knit, and if so, what method do you use? I do. I have read, I think, 98 books this year, and probably 90% of those were on Audible. or audiobooks. So I do a lot of audiobooks. I listen to audiobooks while I knit. I listen to them while I walk, while I work out. When I drive anywhere, I am always listening to audiobooks. So that is how I have read so many books this year. And then I always have like a hard copy book that I read before bed in the evenings, but those take me longer. So yeah, I guess that's it. I like to read audiobooks. I do and have in the past before audiobooks, so like 10 years ago, before audiobooks were quite so prevalent, I would read them electronically, like on an iPad, so that I could just like flip the page really easily. I also used to have a holder that held my books open, but I found that to be really finicky because they like push the page back to keep it in place. And so you have to like pull that down to flip the page, put it back up. So there you go. That is how I do it. All right. We did it. We did it with minimal coughing. I'm actually pretty shocked. And I'm gonna go make myself some tea. I hope that you have such a good weekend this weekend. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you back next week. I hope to be here next week. We are literally gonna be in the middle of moving, so we will see. I have not missed a week yet, and I really don't want to, but I'm going to be gentle with myself and play it by ear. If I can't get rid of this cough and we just run out of time, and we also have our internet getting turned off on a certain day, we'll just see how it goes. But I hope to see you back here next week. And if not, there's a chance that we might miss the next 2 weeks because I also am going to teach at a retreat like 2 days after we move. So we're gonna fly by the seat of our pants. We're gonna see how things go. But I really appreciate you being here, and so I really hope that I'm gonna see you here next week. I'm gonna do my best. Happy knitting, happy making, happy spinning, or baking, or cooking, or whatever you're gonna do. And that's all I got. Bye.